I accepted the invitation to talk to you today about the kind of broader concept of sustainability. And a white paper was published on Monday. Who in this room is aware of that fact? 1, 2, 3, 4, and he's not from Wales. So I think it's an important opportunity to actually give you a bit of history about the white paper and where it's come from and the impact it will have and the opportunities it will create in the context of higher education. And I'm glad that Rob said at the beginning, it's very much about competitive advantage, because we're all going to have to look at the paradoxes that Ewart put up at his last slide. And one of the real paradoxes is how every single one of us positions ourselves in a way that enables students to choose us. Because at the end of the day, we need students to be choosing our institutions. And I think there is a particular opportunity for Wales in the context of the role higher education plays in the wider public agenda. So that's really what I'm going to look at in this context. Back in 1999, when the Assembly was established, those of us who came in as Assembly members at the time were rather delighted to find that there was a unique duty in Wales. It was unique because no other country in the world has the duty expressed in this way, and it was there in the Government of Wales Act. And so the Government of Wales Act, section 79, says that the government has to have a scheme laying out how it will promote sustainable development in everything that it does. And so that scheme was held to public account, well, so the government would create a scheme in the first place, there had to be an annual report to the Assembly every year, so the government could say how well it had got on with its scheme. And every time there was an election, a new government would have to give a report on how effective the existing scheme was and look at creating a new one. Now, these slides, I hope, are either sitting in front of you or at your tables, so that as I go through, you will be able to make any notes you want to in terms of taking that forward. So that was the duty that was there from the Government of Wales Act, the first Government of Wales Act, that came forward in 1999. The definition the Welsh Government has used, and in fact all parties in Wales have supported, sits very well with that proposition from Stefan Collini around the role of universities. It's about being custodians. We are custodians of the present, but we want to leave the future in at least as good a condition as we found the present, and hopefully better. So it's sustainable development, the Brundtland definition, and interestingly enough, it came through from the World Health Organization. The Brundtland definition is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But the sub-clauses of that are actually critically important in terms of the role of universities, because the first one is about social justice. A hugely important role in sustainable development to look after the poor. Now, that's how it was expressed back in 1987, but the social justice agenda, how we get people from non-traditional backgrounds to go to college, to go to university, to stay in education, not to become NEETs, is a critically important agenda for the whole of the education world. And the idea that the state, i.e. governments, should actively look at what interventions they should put in place to make sustainable development happen. So by putting sustainable development at the core of what government does, it will also lead in the future to further interventions from the state in terms of facilitating that agenda. I suppose the best existing example, and one in which I was very closely involved, was the fact that in waste and recycling terms, 5 years ago, Wales languished behind any other part of the United Kingdom, and we decided when I was in government to take a really active approach to waste. You'll be experiencing yourselves that almost all houses in Wales have food waste collection. We now are recycling more than any other part of the United Kingdom. Whereas when I first became minister, I was told there was about 5 years of landfill left, and we needed to create new landfill sites. I think now there's about 8 years of landfill left without any new sites being created. Because if you take the sustainable development approach, you tackle the cause of the problem, not the effect of the problem. So it's about saying recycling will reduce landfill, will reduce emissions, will contribute towards increased energy from anaerobic digestion, etc. It's a different approach, a different paradigm in the context of the issues. In 2005, the Sustainable Development Commission worked with all governments across the UK, which actually between them were of all political colours, and looked at what sustainable development would look like in the delivery of a government agenda. And those were the 5 principles that it thought should underpin the definition of how that was taken forward. Now, obviously, if we don't live within our environmental limits, then basically food, water will run out. Because we all, as human beings, we can't get away from the fact that however good we are technologically, across the world, we still rely on food. So we do have to have enough food to feed the population. And since we're heading for 9 billion by 2050, that actually is both a dramatic increase in population and a dramatic increase in the needs of food, for example, when, for instance, the grain harvest in Iowa this year was only half of what it normally is. The grain harvest in Russia this year was only half what it normally is because of the changing climate. So there are real issues for us in the context of how to make sure that globally there's our sufficient resources. And those are just in terms of the resources that look after us. I think an example that I always use when I talk to students about this is, everybody has a smartphone, don't they? Well, a key ingredient of a smartphone is a rare metal. Rare metals are rare, hence their name. And rare metals cannot be used indiscriminately and infinitely in the creation of smartphones. So the more people want a smartphone, we know now there's a lot of recycling of mobile phones that contributes towards that, but actually resources management has to recognise we only have one planet, and that one planet is shared between an increasing population. And these challenges are becoming more and greater year on year as we are both have to think locally in terms of our own local resources, but we also are part of that huge global world, particularly technologically. So those 5 principles, we have to live within our environmental limits. If we don't, then we don't have, our environmental limits will shrink. They're shrinking dramatically at the moment, but they'll shrink a lot faster if we don't take action to live within them. But those other aspects are also critically important, that we do have a social justice agenda, we do look at our economy in a sustainable way, and there's some very interesting conversations going on around growth at the moment, and where growth lies. Interesting enough, in the what is sometimes called the green economy, there's a 5.5% increase in market share to the so-called green economy when the rest of the economy is bumping along the bottom. So there is a very clear message that a lot of people are putting to government about the fact that it is the green economy that needs to become the economy that will take us out of recession, etc. But the issue around promoting good governance is about leadership. And PricewaterhouseCoopers were presenting to a conference I was at a couple of days ago, and they were saying that the critical elements of good governance are, and the opportunities for Wales in the context of competitive advantage, is for Wales to both take ownership and demonstrate leadership in this agenda. Because all the natural resources are here in place in Wales. The appetite, the political appetite from all 4 parties is here in Wales. What has not happened yet is actually using, for example, legislation to drive the agenda forward. And very importantly in the higher education sector, because it's had a pretty bad press, particularly in the context of climate change, as the scientific evidence grows, Ipsos Mori tells us how the number of people who believe in climate change goes down. So even though, luckily, we're still talking about 70% of the population believing in climate change, it used to be 80% until they realised how it would affect their lives. And we now have a group of people who refuse to believe in climate change because they don't want to take action on it because the issue is too big. In Wales, there is an existing sustainable development scheme which now needs to be essential reading in terms of understanding what the vision around sustainable development is here. It was published in 2009. In a sense, it's self-explanatory. One Wales, one planet, because there is one country, Wales, and there is only one planet to play with. Although our ecological footprint, what Wales consumes, would tell us that we are consuming here as though we had 3 planets available to us. And the ecological footprint contract has just gone out to tender. Again, the last ecological footprint was calculated by the Stockholm Institute at the University of York. It's just gone out to tender at the moment, so there is a longitudinal study in terms of what the interaction between the government's policy agenda and the ecological footprint, and how that can move forward along with the carbon management and emission management activities towards the centre of the century. But this is all about physical and mental well-being. And of course there are studies across the world that are looking at all the way through from Bhutan's happiness index to the work that Stiglitz and others have done looking at issues around physical and mental well-being and how you can measure that in the context of a successful society. I mean, work Terry and others have done across the years have also told us how unequal societies have a real impact on the physical and mental well-being of a nation. The key sustainability drivers in Wales are that constitutional commitment to sustainable development. So irrespective of your personal views, you live in a country with a constitutional commitment. And if you work in the public sector, there is already that duty in the context of that role. The Climate Change Commission has targets of 3% greenhouse gas emission reductions per year, which are supported by all parties. We have in Wales Education for Sustainable Development and Global Citizenship as a statutory part of the Welsh curriculum. It's been through a rocky couple of years, it's fair to say, but the Commissioner for Sustainable Futures, in his annual report to government this year, has made it absolutely clear that ESDGC is a critical part of taking the Sustainable Development Agenda forward, needs an ESTIN review now on how it's being delivered in all sectors, in the school, in the college and in the higher education sector, and then on the back of that to have new recommendations from ESTIN about the embedding of ESDGC practice. And some of you will also know about the Wales for Africa programme. Some universities are actively engaged. The University of Glamorgan, for example, is very involved in the PONT partnership with Mbali in Uganda, a partnership that's also shared with the Welsh Government and is around the health agenda and the education agenda and the climate change agenda. These are the 5 key themes from the ESDGC Action Plan that were published in 2006, and I mean they're just logical really, but it's if you're going to deliver appropriate education for sustainable development and global citizenship, it's about getting those links. This is not an environmental agenda other than it's about living within environmental limits. It is as much around a social justice agenda and an appropriate economy agenda as it is around the environment. But it's fundamentally about fairness. It's about fitting what we do appropriately to the future. It's about resilience. It's about ensuring, particularly as universities, training the next generation of leaders, informing, educating, encouraging the next set of curious and self-reflective learners, is how we ensure that there is real discussion around the relationship between power, resources and human rights, the relationship between local and global, and the actions that individuals and organisations can and should take in responding to local and global issues. Now, the fundamental question that was asked in 2010-11 is, did the existing arrangements around the promotion of sustainable development work? Firstly, the scheme, which I outlined at the beginning, required ministers to promote, not achieve. So it was perfectly possible for any minister to say, I'm promoting sustainable development. And in terms of the scheme, that would be sufficient. Obviously, it wouldn't be sufficient for politicians in the Assembly holding the government to account, but in public and legal terms, it would be sufficient. There was no legal definition of sustainable development. So that broad definition, the Brundtland definition, very strongly supported. It's been the best surviving definition of sustainable development around, mostly because it was in one sentence, and anybody who's ever looked at this will find if you look at anything around Rio, you normally have definitions that run to 4 or 5 pages, and you can't even get to the end of the sentence without having to breathe. So it's very important that in terms of accessibility, there is a legal definition in Wales that can be used, that is accessible to Welsh people. Wales Audit Office, despite the fact the ministers were saying, this is what we're doing, they found that sustainable development was not embedded in the civil service. So when they asked a very simple question of people at all random survey of a large number of people in the civil service in different locations, about how are you taking forward this central principle in your job, most people were going, what central principle? So it became very clear that although the permanent secretary and all the directors at the top of the organisation were telling ministers that it was fine, it was being cascaded, there was leadership around this agenda, there was not. And therefore it was not embedded in government practice. And a policy report commissioned by WWF, so an external policy report, a little grit in the mill for government, found that it was not embedded across ministerial portfolios either. I'm very pleased to say it was in mine, but it was not across the piece. So that you ended up with what was a unique constitutional duty that has been celebrated by members of all political parties as something unique around Wales and the establishment of the Assembly, was being delivered, but was not being delivered effectively in terms of how it was taken forward. So the government decided that therefore the duty needed to be looked at again. And why now? Because we know that the kind of challenges that our generation now faces and the next generation will face are very different to the challenges when we first went to university, anybody in this room, or when we first came into work. So what we do in the context of the education system, what we do across the whole piece, the way we design and build organisations, the way in which we engage in a much more of a mixed economy in organisations, it has to serve us better for the long term. It has to be about the causes of issues. It has to be about the preventative agenda, the precautionary agenda, rather than taking unthought through short-term decisions. And it's integrating and balancing the need for the strong economy, the strong Welsh culture and society, because that's about bilingualism as well, very strongly in the context of the environment. So Carwyn Jones made a statement this year, and I've just outlined in red the relevant point: our daily decisions we made in line with delivering a sustainable economy that delivers for our children a legacy that will outlive us all. Universities have been around a long time. In our case, 1822, so we are where higher education began in Wales. If we want a legacy that will outlive us all, we have to look at changing the paradigm around that delivery. So the new legislative commitment is to make sustainable development the central organising principle of the Welsh Government and public bodies in Wales. It's about creating an independent sustainable development body for Wales. Cynnal Cymru, Sustain Wales, effectively will morph into the new independent sustainable development body, and that will be led by a commissioner, and currently the commissioner is Peter Davis, who is the Sustainable Futures Commissioner for Wales. And I know that Peter would be very happy to talk to universities or to groups more widely in the context of university about the impact of the new legislation. The white paper was launched on the 3rd of December. It's, as you can see, it's called A Sustainable Wales, Better Choices for a Better Future. And the duty comes in on higher education to have an appropriate plan in place about how this is going to be delivered for the beginning of the financial year 2016. The proposal is that the legislation goes through 2013-14, and then the first introduction will hit local government, and then the second phase brings in other aspects of the public sector. So those directly controlled by government come in phase 1, higher education, etc., comes in phase 2, and then there's a group of more external but still public-facing agencies that comes in the third phase. The Minister, in his introduction, says, by making every decision a better one, we will build a fairer and more sustainable future, giving us the opportunity to make Wales a better place for us and our children. And that is how the government sees the relationship between those outside elements, the sustainable resource use, the sustainable economy, sustaining the environment, the sustainable society, all contributing towards well-being in Wales. And the current definition that they've used in the white paper is that one. So in a sense, that is the definition the government is now working with. It is a legal definition. It is contained in PPW, in Planning Policy Wales. And so that has been tested with barristers, and barristers are satisfied that that definition would be appropriate in the context of any challenge on the basis of a definition of sustainable development. And the importance of a definition and understanding where it's likely to go as a definition is that whatever the definition is will mean that every other reference to sustainable development in any legislation, either existing or previous, that affects Wales will have effectively that definition. So whatever the final definition is, it won't just apply in the context of the specific legislation. It will apply where that phrase sustainable development is used. It will become the means by which that is interpreted. And as you can see, the sustainable development is the process by which we reach the goal of sustainability. And the goal of sustainability is actually a goal about being future fit, about being resilient. It's not about a perfect world. It is about making sure that the processes and the understanding are there to be able to manage our relationship with the world. And what we've been doing in Trinity St David is actually taking that principle. When the government announced its programme, Trinity St David decided to have a new institute focused on developing the sustainability agenda across the institution. So what we've done is taken a strategic approach to embedding what is coming forward in the government legislation into what we do. So we are doing it ahead of the legislation and therefore being able to test the applicability of this approach. We've got the strategic commitment to sustainability. I think it's important that there is engagement. So we've got the strong support of the Students' Union. There is leadership. We've established the directorate. The directorate is part of the senior management team of the university and heavily involved in the strategic planning. Capacity building. We undertook a staff sustainability skills survey almost immediately after I came into post. And that, in fact, that same survey is being used by other higher education institutions in other parts of the UK to look at looking at the sustainability skills of their staff. It was conducted by Dr. Gavin Bunting from the University of Wales. It's an open resource that we're making available to others in terms of moving forward. And we're very much in terms of working with institutions as part of the Higher Education Academy's Green Academy. And then a strong commitment from the Vice-Chancellor. It's also very important as part of that engagement agenda that there is no fixed ideological idea about how to take this forward, that it can be interpreted at the appropriate level, whether that's at school level, at faculty level, whether that's through the students and others. And we've established a university-wide sustainable development group that is a virtual web platform. It is open to staff and students. It's got one meeting on each campus each term where there will be speakers, and the students are involved in choosing who the speakers are. And we've put a very exciting virtual ideas platform that's accessible not just from our intranet homepage, but actually also from the internet, and run through a program called Vocalize. And this allows anybody to put up ideas. It's quite scary, really, because anybody can put up ideas, and then those ideas can be ranked. In fact, Pembrokeshire College use it as its staff student engagement. They use it as its learner voice. But it's exciting because it's innovative, and the students really enjoying using it. And as a result of that, we've put a competition up there where the students have put ideas up that are actually going to be judged on each campus by some staff and student group in terms of just at this stage putting £500 in before Christmas on something that will improve the local campus. We've had lots of ideas out and that will be chosen by the staff and students. We've made the commitment to embed sustainability into all students' university experience by 2013 by our students incoming then, and in fact we've done it very largely already through faculty plans, which will be publicly available when they go up on our new internet site. But 2013 is because we've also gone into merger with Swansea Metropolitan. You'll know already that it's a merger between Trinity College in Carmarthen and University in Lampeter, but now we're in the merger process with Swansea Metropolitan, which will be completed by August, and therefore it's the new university's offer from September 2013 that will have this in all students' experience. But it's discipline-specific approaches. They're led by the schools, they're led by the faculties, they're led by staff within those. And we're introducing a new employability award with a 20% sustainability component around a set of graduate attributes. And those graduate attributes, they're coming back into fashion, and I'm so pleased that they are. They were around in the 70s, and then they kind of went away, and some universities have stayed with them. But, you know, some universities which are really taking this on as a kind of like USP are very much going for graduate attributes around active citizenship and creative problem solving, as well as, you know, teamwork, learning, personal development, communication, which are critical elements of students' experiences anyway. We are very bad at living within our environmental limits. I have to say this, there's somebody here from Cardiff Met. They're very good at living in their environmental limits. Bangor is also very good living in its environmental limits. We've historically been very bad at it. But therefore this strategic approach means that you can actually do all of this alongside each other. You can take the governance approach, you can take the living with environmental limits approach alongside what you do in the curriculum. So we have developed an environmental action plan that will see us operating good environmental management systems, introducing new Invest to Save programs, and there is going to be a new job which will actually have this written into the job description, which hasn't been there previously. And we've written sustainability into everybody's job description for the new university. But we also want to make it fun. So we have got these new student bursaries, £5,000 we're making available, and beginning of next term we'll be allocating those bursaries to students through that Vocalise, through that web platform programme. And we've agreed as a university to send 2 students to the Global Young Leaders Summit, which is in Johannesburg in August. But those students will have to put up, effectively they'll have to be voted on the basis of what they then offer the university back. So essentially it's going to be the second years because they have to come back. So and say what they will do if they're given that opportunity to be a global young leader. I think it's real competitive advantage. I mean, interesting enough that PwC have just made their presentation to the Welsh Government on the basis of what they're finding in their offices across the world. So we'll ignore their lack of payment of corporation tax for the moment. It's so, but just in the sense of a major global management consultancy player, they are saying that if Wales does this, if Wales rises to the challenge led by government of putting sustainable development at the heart of what it does, where else would you go to understand these issues globally over the next few years? You would come to Wales. There is an opportunity for real competitive advantage for the higher education sector and taking this forward. But we've also found in Trinity St David that actually having a key theme like sustainability through the merger process has been a core of what we're doing as well. It's not finished yet. We're still developing that strategically. I'll be working now specifically with Swansea Metropolitan now that we've just started that role in terms of merger. But those links between corporate social responsibility, the financial savings that are still there in almost every institution in the context of environmental management, but also about demonstrating that if we produce graduates who have actively engaged with this agenda, the active problem solvers for the future, we put Wales at a competitive advantage. And I always like finishing with people who do know what they're saying. Thank you very much.